The Radical Secular Podcast, a demand for justice, equality, and rational public policy. Subscribe at YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and all the major podcast channels. Visit our website at theradicalsecular.com for articles, insights, and our complete library of episodes. Support us on Patreon, and follow us on social media.
Hello and welcome back to the Radical Secular Podcast. I'm Christoph Defoe.
I'm Sean Prophet.
And I'm Joe Kipinti.
We're joined today by my friend and fellow Georgetown Law alum, Nilou Khonsari. Nilou is the founder of Pangea Legal Services in San Francisco, where she and her colleagues focus on immigration rights. Today, Nilou will discuss with us Pangea's collective leadership model, her upcoming book, and what it means to be a movement lawyer. But first, I want to remind you that if you like our show, to make sure to subscribe, leave a review, check out our Patreon, and tell your friends to listen. New episodes post Mondays at noon Eastern on YouTube and all the major podcast channels. And we also publish new articles regularly at our journal at theradicalsecular.com. The Radical Secular Podcast is brought to you by Cannibal & Co., located in downtown Jersey City and at shopcannibal.com. Cannibal, that's Cannibal with a K, stocks a rotating collection of goods ranging from apparel and accessories to home furnishings and fine jewelry. Cannibal weaves together its forward-thinking vision with its traditional roots to provide an expertly curated experience of unique and locally sourced finds. We're grateful to Cannibal for sponsoring our show. Now, we're going to do the t-shirts during the guest segment today, so I'll just go ahead and introduce Nilou. A refugee and immigrant to various countries herself, Nilou is deeply committed to standing up for the rights of immigrants in the United States and worldwide. Prior to founding Pangea Legal Services in late 2012, Nilou started a private practice where she represented immigrants of many backgrounds, seeking relief from deportation and other areas of immigration law. She also served as a supervising attorney of the Refugee Services Program and oversaw caseworkers at OMID Advocates for Human Rights, both abroad and in the United States. As an attorney with the African Advocacy Network, Nilou represented immigrants in their asylum proceedings and other immigration matters. Prior to relocating to the San Francisco Bay Area, Nilou was a Fulbright Fellow in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Nilou received her undergraduate degree magna cum laude from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service in 2006 and her law degree from Georgetown Law School in 2009 with a certification in refugees and humanitarian emergencies from the Institute for the Study of International Migration. Nilou is licensed to practice law in California. She speaks 5 languages: English, Spanish, French, German, and Farsi. Without further ado, The Radical Secular presents Nilou Khonsari. Nilou, welcome to the show. I know you are a super busy person, so thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
And did you wear a cool t-shirt or maybe a not cool t-shirt? Did you wear a t-shirt for the occasion, Nilou?
I did. I'm wearing my Free Yasmin shirt, Ni una más.
Awesome.
This is a shirt that was designed and made by and for the immigrant community for one of our clients, a mom who had 3 kids, was ripped away from her kids by ICE, thrown in prison, detained for way too long, months, and in the community, as part of the advocacy and organizing and pushing to free her, made these t-shirts that said free her, free Yasmin, and then it said ni una más. Ni una más means in Spanish is not one more detention, not one more deportation of our people. And this was a case where we were successful. We were able to bring her back after
that's great.
A lot of legal and organizing partnerships in order to get, just appellate litigation. It was just awesome. It was a long effort. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm not surprised in some way that that's the story that you have. I mean, you really do a lot of really amazing work. And so let's go on to the next person. Who's up next? Joe?
Hi. My T-shirt. Yes, of course. I was still thinking about your story.
It's a really riveting story, actually.
It is,
it's pretty
and I
intense.
want to know more about it, honestly, because that's really an important thing for me. I used to work with immigrant and refugee populations, and it's like really important. Anyway, my T-shirt is human.
Awesome.
And I think the reason for this is because we really are all about human flourishing. And we also are seeing just incredible threats to that. And so we want to talk about some of those threats tonight. And I thought, this would be a good thing to represent humans.
Awesome. Who knew that would be a good thing to take seriously? Human beings. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I have a shirt on. This is a shirt that I have been wanting to get a hold of for a long time, and it is the Radical Secular shirt.
Hey.
And we have been focused on content and not on becoming a merch store, but we really do need to get our merch out there because these are great. I mean, we have stickers, we have things you can get through Patreon. This is actually a sample from Patreon. We don't have these available yet, unfortunately, but that is something that we will definitely be working on. And you might also notice that I have a bit different background here because I'm moving house. And so I had to take down my normal studio where I shoot my green screen. So I am here and at a little bit less capacity than normal and lighting and everything else like that. But I'm looking forward to the content of our show today. And Nilou, hearing from you, I think this is going to be really interesting.
Awesome, Sean, and believe me, it's not the background that people come here for, Sean. They come for what you have to say, So we can hear you just fine, and that's what's important, right?
Great.
And we can see you fine too, but you know what I'm saying. I am rocking my Wonder Woman shirt.
Yes.
Because Wonder Woman was, I thought, one of the most important. A couple things going on here is, first of all, your hair reminds me of her hair, Nilou. It's similarly dark and black and sort of up like that, and it looks great. But also just because, and I think that the work that you do is really, really important. And well, before I get into that, I think that Wonder Woman as a concept and as the movie that came out is super important. Representation really, really, really matters, right? And beyond that, I just think that the work that you do is super, super important. And I think that that women leaders and women creators, we talk about this on the show all the time. The power distribution on this planet is so comically out of whack, and women have never been adequately represented, and that's probably a lot of the reason why we find ourselves where we find ourselves. So that's sort of what I was thinking when I put on this shirt today. So awesome. I love everyone's t-shirts. Thanks for everybody for playing. And let's just get into it. Let's start with a little bit of background on you, Nilou. The audience has already heard your bio, and it is incredibly impressive. What should the audience know about you that's not in your bio?
Yeah. What people know is I'm an immigrant. I'm an immigration attorney. I founded a nonprofit 9 years ago. What people might not know is that I was born in Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. That was a war that was U.S. funded. The U.S. provided the Iraqis missiles and bombs to drop them on Iran. And I have memories of sleeping in the basement of my grandparents' house for safety, instead of in our rooms upstairs, and waking up to shattered glass windows. So my parents and I, we became asylees in Germany when I was a toddler, and I grew up there. And then I came to the U.S. when I was 12, where I was initially undocumented. So all the asylees and undocumented immigrants from Latin America, Africa, other places in the world that I work with every day are like a part of me. They're like my family. Yasmin is my family. And a lot of their life stories are really familiar to me.
Sure. That is, yeah, absolutely. That is powerful. It's powerful, and it's so amazing to have your voice, your voice here. Hopefully, we can amplify it a little bit more. Because what you do again is just so important. Did you guys want to comment on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that so well. I was in college fighting against that war myself, and I actually met a few. There was a refugee young woman that I met that I knew from Iran at the time. Through a friend who was sponsoring her. So it's really a piece of history for me. So it's really great to have you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, look, let's take the next question here. And what I'd like to do, Nilou, is allow you to tell us some background about your organization, right? You have really sort of started this thing from scratch, and you've built it into a $2 million organization, you and the people around you. So tell us about that process. Tell us about Pangea. What is Pangea? Let's go.
Okay, so how did I start the organization? I mean, I didn't start the organization with money, if that's what you're asking. I started out with $3,000 of my savings. I had over $100,000 of student debt, and I didn't have seed funders or access to private wealth or family wealth. What I did have though was this immigrant kind of just do it, worst things have happened kind of attitude. Sure. And Joe, maybe you could relate. I was committed to doing the immigration work. I had gone to college and law school and worked abroad for a bit in West Africa and Sierra Leone, and then came back and was in the Bay Area. And so I started surveying the field. I was like, I want to do immigration work. I just started with a basic Google search, like immigration organizations in the Bay Area, like who are they? What are they? Who works there? Started like checking out like, who do I know in these places? Reached out to people, talked to them. And I kind of did a questionnaire or like an informal survey of everyone that I spoke with, like who's doing what's missing, like what work is being done in the immigration field. And kind of got a sense of what was happening and what was needed. And what I kept hearing over and over again was, we need attorneys for people who have court hearings, who are going to immigration court, and who are in deportation proceedings. So people who are in court are in deportation proceedings. Some are detained, some are not detained. And so that's what I kept hearing, like, oh, there's a lot of organizations, they do immigration, like green card application, citizenship, like the affirmative work, but no one's doing this like detained or this court work. Or very few are doing this work. There's like really small quantities, small scales, private attorneys. So I linked up. I took on a few pro bono cases, won them one after another. And there were asylum cases in immigration court. And then the referrals started coming in, and I started asking for low fees. And one of the nonprofit organizations that I was partnering with was like, we want to hire you, but we don't have funding for this. Like, why don't you just, charge some fees, and we'll support you with materials, supplies, paralegal research, support, and please like help our community. Please represent these clients in court. So I did it, and I started doing this, and I from that started this like low fee practice, and then I slowly transitioned that into Pangea and transferred my low fee cases to Pangea, the organization that I registered, went from there. Wow. I think the key to like getting from zero to where we are now, like which is like a $2 million budget, is identifying this like huge need, like seeing that there was a real need for this kind of legal work, and then the gap, like seeing that there's just not like, it's not being filled. Like the need is really not being filled.
Right.
And then doing it well, I did the work well. Yeah. And this was like the three magic pieces, to get us there. Yeah. And then, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you, like, what laws, right? That like what is your bread and butter, right? I mean, I'm a labor and employment lawyer, right? So it's the FLSA, right? It is various laws that I'm brain farting on, but there's a body of substantive law, right? That we work with every day, and in the immigration space, what is that? Is there a common law that's developed? Is it more of is it statute based? In which statutes are we talking about?
We're talking
broad terms.
Broad terms. We're talking about case law. We're talking about the Board of Immigration Appeals, which falls under immigration. Mm-hmm. If we want to, I mean, I could turn this back on you. Like the three. What are the three branches of power? Three branches of power. We've got the legislative, the executive, the judicial.
Sure.
We work under all of them. We work in all of these branches. And under the executive is where the immigration court falls. That's also where the Immigration Appeals Court, the Board of Immigration Appeals, falls. So we're really practicing a lot under the executive branch and in this area. And then, Congress is where like asylum law, the Refugee Act is passed, or certain other like more permanent laws are passed. And then the judicial, the courts, like we do also appeal our cases, like Yasmin's case, we appeal to the Federal Court of Appeals in San Francisco. And so we practice there. So we kind of go across all three branches.
And I wanted to make a comment about immigration, because if you're not someone who has ever run afoul of the immigration system, as in tried to get a family member from another country into the country, you have no idea how absolutely agonizing and terrible the system is. And the United States just really doesn't like letting people in. And I'm wondering if I don't know what, obviously you deal with this every day. I only dealt with a personal situation, but it dragged on for years, and the person was ultimately not let in the country. And after all the court cases and everything, it was denied. So I'm just wondering, how many times does that happen? How many times do you actually see that where families are split up by the U.S. immigration system?
It happens this day, every day, just far more than it happens otherwise. I mean, we always hear, like the person should just get in line. Oh, they should just come into the U.S. legally. Like they can just come legally.
Yeah.
Gross.
Actually, no, that's like, there's a 0.001% chance for the majority of the people that we work with that are here. And Pangea actually works specifically with folks that are already in the U.S. and already, have a path to legal status, some avenue, whether it's asylum or U visa cancellation, some avenue to lawful status. And there are many, but the avenue to actually get in is slim to none, especially for people of color or, for the brown immigrants, especially for immigrants who have no access to wealth, have like not money to show in their bank accounts. And then the separation, the family separation, like what was about to happen to Yasmin, she was torn apart from her kids, separated from them. The fact that she got reunified is, is possible, and the chances actually increase when there's legal representation, when there's community advocacy. But when there isn't, chances are very low.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, there's basically three broad categories. We have people who have documents, green cards, and that are officially immigrants, and then there's the undocumented, and then we have the refugee population. And I wonder, which one do you work with most, and which one do you think is most challenging, having the most struggles right now?
I don't know if we can play the oppression of Olympics on this one, but we work with, it's like, I don't know. They're all being, they're all struggling and being oppressed in different ways and attacked and targeted in different ways. The population that I work with the most is the undocumented population in the U.S. folks who come here on the classic C visa. I don't know if you've heard about that one. It's really popular. Visa.
No, please.
Visa de Coyote. It's the coyote visa. It's a joke.
When that happens, okay, like I know that people who either lie on their immigration form or enter the country illegally can receive a 10-year ban. How often do you see that happening?
That happens very often. People are removed or deported very quickly, especially folks from Mexico. There's like no time. Like I had a client once, but I've had many clients actually who are picked up, and then if they didn't have like an attorney, or if they didn't like say they were afraid to go back and claimed fear and asylum, then they're bussed back the same day. So so when that happens and they come back again, there's this 10-year, or once there's this deportation after entering without lawful documents, then this, there's the statute. I mean, it depends on the situation and the length of stay in the U.S., but there is this 10-year ban, or this 10-year wait period. And then after the 10-year wait period, there is no like other visa that automatically like appears or becomes available. It's just a 10-year wait period before, like, if there is, if
Wow.
So what you're basically saying is that people cannot come to this country legally, pretty much under almost any circumstances.
Very, very few circumstances under which they can come to the United States legally. Of course, there are visas. Of course, they're like A through, like, I don't know what letter we're on now, like W visas. There's the whole alphabet. We have a lot of visas. They're generally most available to folks with higher degrees of education, access to wealth, single people, or people who have not single people. Sorry, they're generally available to people who have access to wealth, higher levels of education, and come from Western countries or more privileged countries.
And that's what I want to move on to the next segment, but that's what I was thinking as we were talking about this, right? There is two immigration systems, right? There is an immigration for the wealthy and connected, or not even wealthy and connected, right? The people that Donald Trump said, why don't we get the good immigrants, right? Like, right, this pure racism, right? That spewing from him, not surprising. But my point is that there is that immigration system for folks who can come in and sponsored by a corporation and by a business and all this sort of thing, right? And then there's the one for everybody else, which is overwhelmingly brown people, and that is not a mistake. But let's move on, because I want to talk about one of the easily, Nilou, the most fascinating element of what you're doing over at Pangea, setting aside the amazing sort of day-to-day work you're doing, is your collective governance model. That is something that we sort of, I think, fantasize here about it at the Radical Secular, like a new kind of way of thinking about work. So how does that work for you, Nilou? And isn't it inefficient?
Yeah. So how it works, I guess. So how it works first, we share leadership. That means, and we diffuse our power. We have transparency. So some examples of that are, all decision-making and executive authority is distributed in hubs, and we have 8 different hubs. A hub is like a leadership team, and everyone in my organization is on a hub. We have 17 full-time staff. And all staff, another example is like all staff receive the same salary. We're at $70,000, regardless of educational attainment or your professional experience. And then, and some organizations that are also, collectively governed and intentional about the salary stuff have tiers, but they have caps on their highest paid and their lowest paid. And so, that's another way to sort of share and diffuse power. And then another thing we do is new policies or big decisions for the organization are voted on by the full team. And the other thing, one other example is last year when not last year, it was about 2 years ago, we removed the co-executive director titles that my colleague Bianca and I held, and we all became co-directors. So that reflects, our collective and distributed power structure through our hubs. And that's a few examples of how we practice this shared leadership, and it means that literally everyone is included in our processes, and everyone gets a voice. There's like the structure is super clear. Who's making the proposals and decisions is clear, and we have like deep conversations around people's needs, and like from those conversations, our relationships are stronger. And I think it's the most important thing is that there's full buy-in on policies and organizational decisions because people's voices are heard.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, and so, to your question of, is it inefficient?
I'm just poking fun, obviously, but I am interested to hear, right? That would be a criticism somebody would say. It's like, well, if you have a CEO, the CEO gets a decision and makes a decision and the company moves that way, right? So I think that's, so how do you solve for that? Or is it just worth it,
Yeah. Well, is it worth it? Yes. Is it inefficient? Is it inefficient sometimes? I mean, I would say yes and no to that. I think that like unlearning this like colonizer hierarchical top-down mindset takes time. It takes a lot of energy to undo that and to build something new, like from scratch with like few allies or few examples or models to turn to. There is that. But then on the other hand, I think it's really efficient. It's been really efficient for us in the long run. In the 9 years that I've been at Pangea, we've had like almost 100% retention.
Wow.
This is really. I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was when you brought up the $70,000 figure. This reminded me. I mean, if you've been doing this for 9 years, then you were first. But there's a guy named Dan Price with a company called Gravity Payments, and he did the same thing where he put everybody on a $70,000 salary from the top to the bottom, and he said it cut his turnover in half.
Yeah. I actually just learned about Gravity Payments. That's awesome. If you know of other organizations or groups, I would love to learn or connect with them. I'm like deep in the research and seeking out folks.
I do wonder in a way, because it was like, if you think about the lowest paid person getting 70, that's great. But for people at the CEO level or somebody like yourself, maybe you have student loans or other things that are, it might be difficult to make it in some places on 70K. What do you say about that?
Agreed. And that's why I would like for everyone to get to 100K, especially in the Bay Area. That's considered a living wage according to the MIT calculator. Living wage is 100K for a single parent with one child, which is me. So that's what I would like. And that's what I'd like for everyone. And at the same time, I don't, at Pangea, we have salary conversations every year across the staff. And we talk really transparently and openly about what, how this amount feels to us and what we need. And through these conversations, I've learned really interesting things about my colleagues. Like, debt isn't the only thing. Like my having student debt that's being repaid by my university and that it's on a forgiveness plan is like maybe not as much as a burden or equal a burden as somebody else's debt. One of my, another colleague may have medical debt for a parent because their parent is undocumented, and that's a much bigger burden that's unsupported by any system or structure. And then the other thing is that with these tiers, like when we do go into these tiers, I'll leave it. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but there's another question on this that Christoph, you had on this.
I would just wanted to, I mean, we don't have to stick super close to anything. We can do whatever we want here, so don't worry about that. But I will say, Ray, you have paralegals and support staff that are making the same as lawyers, right? They have less education, they have less debt, they have less experience. Is that sort of what you're getting at there? That even though it may seem that way from the outside, it doesn't mean, well, first of all, that perhaps their their contribution should be recognized as that as equal, just on the merits. And then second of all, right, people have a lot of things that are below the surface, sort of concerns and debts and stuff like that we don't see. But anyway, would you want to comment on that at all? Or
yeah. I mean, I think you hit it on the nail. I mean, you hit it on the spot. That's it. But yeah, so I think there's a few things that come to mind actually. There's on what you just said, Christoph, the merits, like merits is a whole other thing. Like the way that we've defined merits in the US and in most places is really like enforcing oppressive systems and this like colonizer mindset. Merits like, oh, like if you're a lawyer, okay, you have had to have gone to college and law school and, pass this exam. And most people who end up there are white. Many end up, many are men, or many are, members of more privileged groups. And if you considered merits, like there's actually one organization in Oregon that did this equitable merits like revamp in their organization, and they assessed merits based on experience, like experience being BIPOC, experience with like incarceration, experience being LGBTQ. They valued those things and they tiered their salaries based on that. So the highest paid people ended up being BIPOC, LGBTQ, and like women. Right. And the lowest people ended up being white males. And that's, there are different ways to look at merits. That's one thing. And then one thing that I've seen, like in organizations that are well-intentioned, that do have salary scales, and I think salary scales are good. There are different ways to implement salary scales that are actually more fair and less disparate and less extreme. Sure. But organizations that are well-intentioned and want to be horizontal have tried scales based on seniority, like what you were saying, Sean. Like if you're a CEO or you're a founder, or you've worked at an organization 9 years, maybe like you should be paid more. Well, what happens in a lot of organizations when that do that is the lowest paid people end up being BIPOC women, non-binary, like people who are like generally paid less in all structures. And so looking at these structures, it's a lot of work, and and just to reiterate, there's unrecognized debt, like the medical debt I mentioned, and there's unrecognized labor, emotional labor, not just like the physical labor that staff do. There's a lot of things that are unsaid and unseen, and we are looking to break from that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I just want to talk about the upside a little bit, because I think the whole governance thing, the efficiency needs, is really, I have a great anecdote for that. I'll do it real quick. When I lived in Argentina and working with indigenous folks, they had, this community was in crisis. Everyone was fighting. And the NGO that was working with them was just beside themselves. They didn't know what the hell's going on, because they typically weren't this way. And it turns out what they did was that they used to have consensus meetings. So the community would go in and they would take 3 days to make decisions, which was considered highly inefficient. So the well-meaning NGO introduced democracy, right? And it just totally messed them up. Because honestly, when you have consensus, and it does take time, what it does, it creates community. It creates, everyone feels like they've had a say and have to share a stake in the decision. Whereas with democracy, it's like you have losers and winners, right? And the community wasn't used to that. So it really created a lot of bad feelings for people that they just felt, what ultimately the show to this NGO was that this consensus system was incredibly efficient for that community, far more so, right, than our colonized ideology about how to do things. So I think that's wonderful to hear that there are actually models going on in our society, because consensus is challenging for us because we are colonized intellectually and ideologically and emotionally, and we don't understand how to do it. But it's wonderful to hear that it's being done and it's succeeding. That's great.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Yeah. Sean, did you want to jump in for a second there? Or?
Yeah. Well, I want to say, I think that everything you're saying, I completely agree with, and I want to see all the different types of value, emotional labor, debt that is hidden and not necessarily acknowledged, all of those things taken into account. But it seems like where we are now with most of corporate America is you have like a 300-to-1 CEO to lowest paid worker ratio. It's insane. And I think that like if we could even get people to like 20-to-1 or 10-to-1, like it would be a huge improvement. And getting everybody totally flat, it's almost like that's a unicorn. I mean, that is so like, that is like perfection, in a way. And it may even be beyond perfection, because I think that there has to be like it seems like you don't necessarily want a hierarchy, but you want people who are, working their way up through an organization to feel like that they have a goal, right? I mean, aside from obviously the goal is the success of the organization, but they might have I think everybody has personal goals too. And so I'm wondering just what how you see that. Can there be a scale that's fair, that really works, that's not completely flat?
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Like shrinking the gap is great. I'm not saying at all that the complete flat is the ultimate goal for everyone in every institution. And in terms of what you're saying about like, working your way up to like a level, I think that's what we're used to, like people are used to climbing the ladder, up to the management level, to the top. And the way I see Pangea, like our organization, is more like a jungle gym. You can go like climb here a little bit and then go try out the swings and try out it's really agile and, really fulfilling, I think, for everyone that's involved and in the organization.
Great point. What I was thinking, and just to talk a little bit about what you were just saying, Sean, and what you just said, Nilou, is right. We've talked a lot about colonizing of the mind, right? The sort of the colonial perspective, and maybe that we've been conditioned to want to drive up towards something, because our culture has been that way for so long, right? So
yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
saying that there's no independent like drive that we each have, but like that concept of I want to work my way through an organization is itself a colonizer mindset, right? So I think that like, and again, I agree that, and I love that you are. I do not like dogma, so I really hear you. It's really great to hear you, Nilou, be like, yeah, well, this is what works for us, right? And it'd be better, and let's shrink that gap. And you talk also about different tier systems that you've seen that have been that actually makes some sense. I think what we can all agree on, though, is that the system that we have right now, 300-to-1, right? This sort of you basically walk into like a fascist dictatorship every time you go to work, right?
Oh, it's
someone
terrible.
someone can just fuck with you for just because they have the power, right? And we know how power corrupts. And here is sort of a joke, but when did you become such a communist is the question. When was the point at which you said to yourself, you know what, I don't like the old hierarchy anymore, and I want to become a communist? But in all seriousness, though, like, did you always feel this way about this? Because it sounds like this was sort of like a journey for you. Is this something you would have advocated for?
Well, I am the child of revolutionaries. I'm the child of revolutionaries who helped topple the oppressive monarchy in Iran. And I'm also a product of colonization and U.S. imperialism, like I was describing before. The U.S. and England overthrew Iran's democratically elected leader back in the 50s and installed a dictator, the king. And dictatorship and patriarchy was, ingrained in me since the seed. So I definitely have had those tendencies. And I, even though I've had these values, I developed these values in college. I definitely perpetuated a lot of that, like this like hierarchical, like top-down mindset. And I definitely have made colleagues feel unseen, unheard, unvalued. And some of the most painful moments at Pangea, were like the result of me doing those things. And they've also been like my greatest learning moments that like led to my growth. And I share a lot more about that in my book that's going to be out in 2022 and later this year. But yeah, when did I develop these ideas? I developed these ideas when I studied abroad in Argentina. And it's funny that you mentioned Argentina, Joe.
Where were you?
In Buenos Aires, in the capital.
Okay.
Yeah, I studied abroad there. And I was kind of blown away by what I saw firsthand. And what
amazing country.
It's amazing. And specifically what I saw was the worker co-ops. I was there in 2004 and Argentina had just come out of a huge economic crisis. And back in 2000, 2001, the peso, the money had been devalued. All these foreign investors, which most of the factories and industries in Argentina were foreign owned. All these foreign investors fled. They just packed up and went back to Italy, Europe, wherever they were coming from. And these factories and these businesses were left in empty shells. And people were unemployed. They were totally desperate. They didn't know what to do. Banks had shut down. Their money was worthless. So these workers went and they literally physically broke down the chained up factory doors, went in and restarted these factories. And then by the time I visited them, they had set up these systems of shared leadership that I was that I ended up writing my college thesis on. And then I had that in the back of my mind when I started Pangea, this cooperative model, they shared leadership. They rotated the role of president or the leadership, and they shared money. They distributed the income from these factories. It was very little initially, but they distributed based on people's needs. They were you have more children, so you get a little extra pay this month. You have a health issue in your family, you get extra salary this month or this week. And it wasn't just one or two factories. There were over 300 recuperated factories in Buenos Aires, in the greater Buenos Aires area, that did this, and they ended up supporting each other over the years. One of them was doing not so well economically, the other one would bail them out a little bit. They created this amazing network, and when I saw this, it was, you asked, have I always had these values? I was no, because I was ingrained with this dictatorial patriarch, that was kind of the top down teacher student parent child top, that was what I was used to. And
right.
But then I saw for the first time these workers in circles, and I was wow, this is the most humane form of relationship structure I've seen. This is amazing.
It's really interesting because when Christoph he made this joke, I'm thinking to myself, are you now or have you ever been a communist? It's that whole Red Scare 1950s blacklisting thing, and it really kind of pointed out to me, because when I you hear that word communist and everybody just freaks out, right? I mean, you literally freak out, and even thinking about this idea of a workers' collective, where you might get a little more just because you needed it. It's so foreign to the American mindset. And I think it's something that we really have to think about and look into. Why is it that we are so against this? What is it about having everyone have enough and everyone being taken care of that is so that it just generates such hostility? And I'm wondering if you have any insight about that.
That's a big question. The insight on the hostility. Yeah, I mean, did you all watch the movie Don't Look Up?
Of course we did. We did a whole show on it.
We did a whole show on it, actually.
Oh, that's right. Actually, I saw that. Yeah, I didn't watch it, but I saw it. Yeah.
Right.
So in the movie Don't Look Up, I think there's this great line of where the son, the president's son, is saying, "We need you, the working class, to help us, the cool rich, to fight them." And them is the resistance, the commies, anybody who's questioning. I think that's my insight to your question. I think that summarizes it.
That is so perfect. So perfect.
That is.
And you know, I think what we're talking about here too, which I think is really interesting, is how we, and this is what I keep coming back to as we talk here, is how we are colonized from the inside, right? That we don't even realize that we are operating under these ideas that seem like they're givens, right? Like, this is the way it always is, right? That's just a given. That's sort of what you're talking about, Sean,
natural.
right? And it's natural, right? Yeah. And what I respect about what you've done, and I think that's a challenge that we all face, those of us who I think we think who are progressive and we care about this stuff and we care about moving forward, is that willingness to continue to ask ourselves those questions, right? What am I assuming about the world right now, right, that is in line with that an ideology that I don't actually agree with, and what am I assuming is givens? And I think that's a real challenge. I think that is sort of the challenge, especially those of us who you know, we get up and we do what we can for social justice, right? We play our little part in the act, you know. I think it's important that we keep asking ourselves those questions, and so I think that it's really cool that you have. And I want to. Does anybody else want to sort of comment any more on that? It looks like, Joe, you might have something to say.
Yeah, I do. I think it's not just about ideology. I mean, ideology is a big part of it, but I mean, there's been a strategy and tactics of absolutely undermining any efforts around the world to have that cooperative shared model. But the United States primarily, but also other countries, where I mean, even Iran, where after the revolution, for the first couple of years before the Ayatollahs consolidated power, there's a lot of experimentation there about social cooperatives, Soviets and all that. And it happens everywhere, but it's always the hierarchies come in and they squash it. It's not just that it just falls apart on its own. And that's been the history for the last 150 years. A constant assault on any, you know, regular people's efforts to try to live a shared cooperative life. It's been a constant assault.
Totally.
And really, that's something we're going to keep in mind.
I think it manifests for a lot of people. Like I again, on social media, this is how you tell what people are saying and thinking. And somebody was remarking, "Oh, I see all these expensive cars in line at a food bank." And the just sheer nasty judgment of that statement is insane. Like, how do you know why somebody has a nice car, right? And this idea that everybody like is all into, we should be kind, we should be compassionate, we should be cooperative, but then the first opportunity, they're going to look down on someone who is getting help, someone who is getting any sort of social support or cooperative support, right? Because what are food banks? Most of the time, they are people who've just gotten together to share surplus food, right? And so why would someone be upset at someone sharing surplus food? And then the other comment that came up is, oh, well, what about grocery stores? You're going to put grocery stores out of business. And it just goes on and on like this, where there's just so many bad ideas that come up naturally in the population against any sort of equality or justice.
Yeah. That's, you know, really great point, Sean. Really, really great point. And I think it's important, right? People always say, you hear this a lot in the social media growing up too, is right. You know, socialism doesn't work, right? It just makes people X, it makes people Y, or communism doesn't work. You see, it's failed. Capitalism works, but it's like, no, but capitalism works the best at all of that. But what ends up happening though is that, like you're saying, Joe, and what everyone's saying here is that it's not like they actually had to get a full chance to show themselves, right? They're immediately just stormed by, it could be the CIA, for Christ's sake, right? And oftentimes it is the CIA, right? Yeah. So my point is that, like, and just neoliberalism in general, right? So you have these, there really is rarely is there a really pure opportunity to experiment in that way. So I want to move on now to another topic here. I just let us know a little bit of the work you're doing over at Pangea. So I know you call yourselves movement lawyers, which I think is fucking rad. So what does that mean, though? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Sort of along the same theme of hierarchy, lawyers often like to be, you know, sort of at the center or above, you know, telling clients top down, you know, I'm the authority. And the system is set up that way. Clients are below the attorney. The attorney is below the judge is below the appellate judge, the immigration judge is below the appellate, and it goes on. We have these. It's like this system, and it ultimately protects, like, this power, and these hierarchies protect people with concentrated, like, wealth and power, like very few people. And a movement lawyer kind of sees through that, and we don't view ourselves above the client or below the judges. We kind of, see the power in the masses and in the collective, and in the possibility that we could have a system that's not rigged and stacked against us and our community. And I think that, in some ways we're like super optimists. I think it also means encouraging our clients to take a mic, or in the community to take the microphone and speak for themselves, and connecting folks like Yasmin, whose shirt I'm wearing today. We connected her with a newspaper while she was in immigration prison, and we helped her write an op-ed and place the op-ed in a publication, and like lifting those voices. I think that's movement lawyering. And then supporting her and the movement that was fighting to shut down the ICE prison facility that held Yasmin, and winning that. We were able to shut down the Contra Costa detention facility, the ICE contract with them. Like pushing for things like that, that's movement lawyering. Not just stopping at the like, oh, I got to get my client out of jail, or oh, I just got to get my client asylum. It's like going beyond that and trying to break the system that's, is holding this together.
Nice. It sounds like it's a very holistic sort of approach as well. How does it work with an individual? Let's say you have a client. How is that your relationship with that particular, or a case particularly an asylum case, let's say? How does your relationship with the client differ, and the other? I guess what I'm thinking, what does collective governance look like in terms of a client lawyer relationship? Is there multiple lawyers? How do you approach that?
Yeah, actually, in a lot of our cases, our lawyers team up. There's like one main lawyer that's holding the case, or most pieces of the case, and there are others that are collaborating and supporting in different ways. But I'll give you an example of one of my first clients who was detained. His name was Jesus. He was young. He was a young guy in his 20s. His dad called me when he'd been picked up. He'd been thrown into jail, picked up by ICE. On his way back from work or at work, and his dad called.
Those lazy immigrants, right? Oh my God! He was on his way home from work.
Astounding!
What? It's astonishing. Sorry, it just pisses me off.
I know. On his way from, and not only like not just any job, but this kid. I mean, he had he'd come here to the U.S. He'd been brought here when he was like 4 years old, had gone to school here, was the only kid in his family to graduate high school. Everybody else around him had like not made it. And he just like one day made up his mind and went to night school, like got a teacher to help him and graduated, was the first in the family to graduate, then got this job at this sheet metal factory and got promotion after promotion because he was amazing. And like his employer loved him. And he did some really he showed me some of the like complex math and like online, the tech stuff he did with this sheet metal. And that's what he was doing. And yeah, exactly. And ICE came to pick him up to deport him. And based on what? Based on an old deportation order that he'd gotten when he was 9, because he had a bad lawyer. That bad lawyer had been disbarred. He had already been disbarred, and that like had messed up the case. So then, before I got this call, Jesus had also been deported in his like a few years earlier. He had been deported, and had come back. So he had this issue of like having been deported and come back again. And that put in the question of DACA. DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. President Obama just announced DACA. This was a few months after he announced it. And ICE was saying, nope, like Jesus can't get DACA because he's been deported and he was out of the country during the period that he needs to be here. And so it was just so unfair. It was so unfair. that's just a little context. So Jesus's dad called me and said, my kid's in jail. Can you help him? I drove down. I stopped the deportation. I entered my appearance. But then it was not the legal work or the legal arguments that I made that got Jesus out. It was the community advocacy. It was the DACA activists, the dream activists, the youth, and like every single one of the like 50 plus people that came out to the rallies, the over 5,000 people that started this petition, that went around to congressional reps and senators around the country, and the calls that were made to legislators, and the calls that ultimately were made to ICE to release Jesus. That's what got him out. And the day that he was getting out, he called me and he was like, Nilou, they're telling me to pack my bags. I'm getting out. Is this real? And he was like, it better be real.
Oh, wow.
It better be real because I just got top bunk. I'm not giving up my top bunk.
I mean, that's like a big, right? That's a big status step up. That is a lot, like in that kind of environment, right? So that's unbelievable. Wow.
I'll tell you, as you're telling this story, my blood is just starting to boil and boil and boil because I'm thinking about all of the MAGA shitheads that we need to send back somewhere else and get rid of them and bring people like Jesus into the country who are go-getters and who are, devoted, who learn a second language. They come here, they figure it out, and they're successful, and then we kick them out. I mean, it's insane to me.
It's so insane. So insane. Joe, do you have I'm sorry, go ahead, Nilou.
Yeah, but I mean, the community had power in this one. The community fought for that. And that's what really held him here. And that's what allowed us to actually then get him DACA. It was all this advocacy that then allowed, I have to say the motion that I submitted to the court to reopen his case was built basically on all of this advocacy. There was very little law. There was discretion.
Wow.
There was discretion that was exercised. It was extra legal. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so if I could just follow that up quickly. So is that kind of advocacy part of like every case, right? I mean, or is that sort of your modus operandi, or that is for certain cases that might work? Maybe if you don't have the law on your side.
Yeah, it's not part of every case. I would say most of our asylum cases don't have that at the moment, but it's something that we are striving towards. We just hired organizers at our organization, and we're looking to work and organize with our clients and their family members and the communities in every step of the way. And that's something that we're looking to build in parallel and expand on, and to just, it's part of the like movement lawyering, power building, community building vision that we have.
It's definitely like an organizer component to this, right? And that's so amazing because we at the Radical Secular care about solutions, and this, like, right, the solution to oppression is always solidarity, right? The solution, that's how you fight back. That's the only way we fight back. That's it, right? And so the fact that you are so really pulling all those things together to help people and create community, that is really, really phenomenal. Joe, did you want to say something? I feel like I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I just want to say that it's really hard to keep feeling hope these days. And you give Nilou, you give me hope.
Definitely.
I think that's right.
I have a lot of hope.
Yeah.
I'm an eternal hope optimist.
That's awesome. It must be so satisfying to have this kind of victory when you're saving people's lives, literally. Like when you're making such a difference. It must be so wonderful to experience that sense of joy, And it's such a blessing to people. For this work is just so important.
It is a joy and it's a relief. I mean, more than anything, it's usually a relief. And after like each asylum case, I don't know if it's but nearly every asylum case, tears come into my eyes. And at the same time, I have to say, it also pisses me off. Like, it just pisses me off. Like,
totally.
I'm often like really relieved and happy, but also angry, really, really angry at the system and at the judges and at the ICE officers and the ICE attorneys about what they make our community and our people go through. And it's both. It's really both. And it's, it's the community and the collective work and that piece of it that that makes the grieving and the anger, that eases it a little bit. And that just keeps us going, I think, a lot of the time. Sure. And not all cases, we don't win all cases. There are cases that we don't win. And when there is we've had, in one case where our client was being deported, community members were there, and we did a go around and we shared, and some of them were some were really depleted, and others were like, we're going to send her care packages so that when she arrives, she'll have a little box of gifts from us. And there are just things that the community and collective can hold that individuals and attorneys alone and organizers alone can't. Yeah.
Sure. Sean, did you have a comment?
Well, I just wanted to say that a lot of people, they hear the name of our show, and this is for our listeners as well out there, that secularism is anti-religion. And it is a little bit of that, but it's also about treating all religions equally. That's the official definition of that word, secularism. But we also extend that definition to treating all people equally, regardless of race, creed, nationality, whatever it is. And so this immigration question, aside from being important to me personally, fits right into the core mission of our show, is trying to get justice with this. And it's like Joe said, it is inspiring to hear you talk about the community and the enthusiasm, but it's also when you look at the logjam that exists at all levels, at the federal, there hasn't been any real federal movement on immigration in many, many years. And so I just thank you for your advocacy and your work. And each one of these stories that happens is multiplied 10,000, 100,000 times. And, so it's gratifying to know that someone is doing something.
Thank you.
I mean, it really does give us hope. I mean, it is. And like you were saying, Joe, in a time when hope, it's hard to feel that way, right? Things are dire, right? So it is, I don't know, really, really important. I deeply respect what you're doing at Pangea. I think that it's all very impressive. I think you're very impressive. It really, more than anything else, right? It's like what I love hearing you talk about is that we can reimagine the workplace. It doesn't have to wake up every Monday morning and it's like that feeling of absolute dread. People do have buy-in you're talking about, right? They feel like they have a stake in this. And the only way we'll get there is by the sort of movement kind of work that you're doing there, because independently we can't do anything. Now, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your book if you'd like to. Don't feel like you have to. I don't want to give you no spoilers or whatever, but at least tell us what is your goal with the book? When will it be out? What in the broadest terms, what should people expect?
Yes. My book is going to be out September 2022. It has two parts. Basically, the two things that we talked about today: the collective governance and our immigrant justice piece, the collective leadership and movement lawyering. Mm-hmm. There's two pieces, and on the collective governance, it sort of chronicles the Pangea from year 1 to 9 to now, and there's just a lot of lessons about Pangea as a case study, but also lessons drawn from other organizations and companies that have this liberation at the forefront.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
Awesome. I mean, it's just, I'm looking forward to reading it. Maybe we'll have to have you back on after it comes out and we all get a chance to read it so we can, talk about these themes. Because to Sean's point, like the themes that we're talking about here, the challenging to hierarchy, the challenge to internal and external colonialism, right? That's inside of us and also that is outside of us. The challenge to these structures that so many of us, right, don't look up. So many of us don't look up, don't take a time to reflect on the way our lives are and ask if it has to be this way, right? Do we have to hate everything when we wake up every morning? Do we? And I don't think that we do. And I think that your energy, Nilou, is really infectious. And I think we could all of us everywhere could use a good dose of that. So
Definitely. For sure.
Thank you all for being part of this conversation. Nilou, thanks so much for joining us. It's been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
I don't know what you guys think, but I think Nilou is seriously kick-ass. She was super impressive in law school. She's super impressive now, and I really enjoyed speaking with her. It was hopeful. Do either of you guys have any final thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I said it all pretty much in the interview, but I can't reiterate enough how much we need people like her at every level, because what gets started in terms of bad policy at the federal or state level ends up getting adjudicated in the courts. And sometimes that's the last stop for mitigating some of these terrible, terrible policies that we deal with. And make no mistake, I mean, the United States of America is suffering grievously from not allowing more free immigration. We would be able to bring a lot more people under the tax base. We would be able to, a lot of this top talent like Jesus, who, fortunately was not deported. There are tons of stories like this of people who have dedicated their lives to becoming a hardworking American citizen, and they just can't get there. And so this, to me, it's one of the top issues facing our nation among the 100 that we have to deal with. But for real, I mean, this is serious, and it's affecting people's lives every day. Millions of people are living in fear of deportation.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I also would say that the aspects of her collaborative and shared workspace is also a really critical aspect of all this, because I think we do need new models. I don't think we're going to make it without them. I think this very hyper competitive, top down hierarchical way of organizing society is spent. I think we're in trouble, and I think we need new models. And that doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it socialism, you can call it whatever the fuck you want. It's not about an ism. It's about, having a better way of managing our society, our relationships, and everything. And there are possibilities. There are models that we can look at, and we need to open our minds to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, this is the thing, is no matter what it is, no matter what the model, no matter how good of an idea it is, if it doesn't allow exploitation of the poor, and if it doesn't create hierarchy, the right is going to be against it, because that is their only priority, that they want to maintain the system as it is. And every effort, you can call it anything, and they're going to call it socialism.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah. And it's insidious. I mean, they're against it overtly, publicly, and they'll speak bad against it, but the whole friggin' structure is organized to stop that kind of thing. Like right from our law. Why don't we have worker cooperatives? We could in a capitalist system. Like you could have cooperative companies working in a capitalist system, but we don't, because it's structured against it, right? Sure. At all levels. And you can look at laws, you can look at all kinds of institutions, why that happens, but it's not incidental. And I think we've got to go there, especially with climate change, especially with the fact that we're a multicultural world and growing more and more connected. We have to get there. If we don't get there, we're in real serious trouble.
And I agree with that, absolutely. And just to tack on another structure that's always under attack is unions and collective bargaining, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a way you can keep your capitalist system, right? And you can have, but workers actually have a voice. And the last thing these folks want, because they know, right, that you destroy hierarchy by working together, by solidarity. That's how you do that. And so that's what's one of the first things that gets attacked and slandered as communism, as if that is inherently a bad word anyway. But right. But communism and socialism, all these words, you know. But it was really great to see, to your point, Joe, to see an example of this functioning. And, you know, it's an amazing thing to see. And to your point, Sean, it reminds us of how that real people are being affected by this every single day. It is not an abstract issue. These are real people. By the way, I mean, in the neighborhood that we all live in right now, there's people that are being affected by that. Right.
Yeah. One more thing I want to say.
Sure.
In terms of neoliberalism, that was brought up. Mm-hmm. Argentina was the proving ground for neoliberalism. They all went in there, all the neoliberals, and it was their test site. It was their model. And it was a fucking failure. It devastated that country. And now it's happened there like it's happened here, but 10 to 20 times faster in Argentina. And maybe what we're seeing now is what we're seeing in Argentina, and workers taking over factories and that kind of thing. We're going to see it here too, I think, at some point. I think there is that hope. I think that eventually things are going to get so bad that people will have no choice but to think about new models. Listen,
even the founders of capitalism, they're the intellectual founders like Adam Smith and Friedrich Hayek. They were in favor of certain amount of workers' rights. They were in favor of some kind of health care, you can look this up, and modern neoliberalism, it kills everything it touches, and it doesn't even hew to its own intellectual roots.
That's an important point. Very there, true. Sean. It's not even honest about itself, right? It can't even actually follow through on the ideology it espouses, which is because really at the end of the day, and we tell you this about conservatism more generally, that it's just a smokescreen for I want to dominate you, right?
That's it.
It's just a nice way of saying I don't want to have to run. I think that I should have more things than you, right? Yep. And I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to get there. And so that's like the entire intellectual sort of exercise of conservatism and neoliberalism. That's all it is. That's all it is.
I'm going to skim the profits off the poor. I'm going to take from the poor, give to the rich. I'm going to put my pollution into the environment and not pay for it. It's all of those things. And that is what it's become. And that is why it's incompatible with democracy, because people, if you have majority rule, people won't stand for that.
And in fact, this is why I'm going to say, I don't know if you know David Harvey. He's a Marxist geographer, scholar. He's saying the neoliberalism is spent, and he's absolutely right. Neoliberalism has led to basically an authoritarian fascist moment.
That's right.
And I think even neoliberalism is going to peter out, because we are in a new phase now. And we've talked about this in the show, but we really got to think about that the damage that neoliberalism caused is now morphing into something new.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
And the
gun is becoming overt. The gun to the head of the people. Previously it was just you might lose your job. Now it's like, if you stand up for your rights at all, we're going to arrest you or shoot you.
Right. Yeah. Which is not neoliberalism. Neoliberalism is basically a hegemonic system where you control through nonviolent means, right? And that's a key difference as well.
An important difference. And so thank you both guys for being part of this conversation. And thank you all to our listeners and to our watchers. We love you. We appreciate you. And remember that if you like our show, to make sure to subscribe, leave a review, check out our Patreon, and tell your friends to listen. New episodes post Mondays at noon Eastern on YouTube and all the major podcast channels. We also publish new articles regularly in our journal at theradicalsecular.com. I'm Christoph Defoe. Thank you for being here. And remember, wherever you are, you can be radically secular.
The Radical Secular Podcast is written and produced by Christoph Defoe, Sean Prophet, and Joe Okipinti. Logo and main title designed by Tim Stetner. post-production and original theme music by Sean Prophet. Special thanks to our support team, Lindsay Brightman, Jillian Sky Jacobs, and Lori Field Okipinti.